My name is Jacob Gluck, and I'd like to talk about going OTD, going off the derech. Unfortunately, while there is quite a bit of literature on the subject, there isn't any information on the process of going off the derech, like what to do, advice, how to do it, what not to do, guidance, direction, practical direction, that is. I mean, not theoretical stuff, just simple advice as to what to do, how to do, and whether to do it in the first place. So what I want to do is a series of videos that explores precisely this domain of practical guidance of how to do it and how to cope with the myriad of challenges that a departee, somebody who has left, is faced with. So first, let me start off with the different reasons for leaving. Personally, I left in 1999, so that is 15 years ago, or maybe 16. And the reason I left is ideological, which typically means that I just didn't believe in the system anymore. It means that I couldn't wake up in the morning and, in good faith, say Moda'ani and say the blessings and pray the 18 blessings, the benediction, Shemona Esrei, and study the Torah and the Talmud and obey the laws, knowing that there is a God and He commanded us to do so and He will reward us. All of that collapsed on me one day. It didn't happen randomly. It happened in response to reading secular books. It happened in response to being exposed to science. And I realized that there is actually a world out there of a lot of wisdom that is outside of the scope of the system that I grew up with. And in fact, I realized suddenly that the subculture that I grew up in could only thrive in the absence of exposure to that system, because it's just inferior. It is rationally inferior. And it is also only enabled by not hopping on the bandwagon of progress, meaning basically halting progress, ignoring the kind of science that is being constantly discovered and researched and elaborated upon by modern civilization. Okay, so by ignoring that, you enable yourself to retain your tradition. And the moment that it dawned upon me and I suddenly saw the light, I suddenly realized what is happening here, I felt extremely resentful that I grew up in a system that did not expose me to that, and I felt a tremendous urge to escape. And so I deliberated. I had a close confidant with whom I could discuss this, but for the most part it was a self-deliberation, and I decided to leave. So this is a typical route of departure, as I would call it, by someone who leaves for ideological reasons. Now here's the interesting thing. When I left in 1999, I actually didn't know that people leave for all sorts of reasons. I had thought that the only possible reason for one to reject traditional orthodoxy is because it's just not true. The kind of claims they make, the kind of tenets, the foundational tenets of the religion. One of the things that, for example, that really bugged me was the chosen nation doctrine. You know, the belief that we are somehow better. The kind of stuff that we do and the laws that Jews obey is superior to the laws and conventions of mainstream society, and I just couldn't reconcile that. I struggled with that for a nice few months. I was exploring and digging and contemplating, and I just couldn't, in good faith, explain it to myself or to another person how that is really the case. And so yeah, so this is the kind of manifestation of somebody who is leaving for ideological reasons. And so at the time I thought that everyone has got to be leaving for more or less the same reason. And it took me many years to discover that that was not the case, that people leave for different reasons. And let me explain what those other reasons are. One, and this is actually a catch-all term, but let's call it social. Okay, people who leave for social reasons. So what that means basically is that they don't fit in. They don't fit into the community for a number of possible reasons. One reason could be that they're different. They're just born different. You could have a physical disability, a mental disability, which in itself are also pretty broad terms. Basically, it's a genetic factor. You're born different in a way that really stands out. You're like a sore thumb. And in a highly conformist and homogeneous community as the ultra-Orthodox are, such a thing is really a handicap because they're not really going out of their way to be genuinely inclusive. Now, they will not reject you. So long as you're part of the community, of course, you're going to benefit from that cohesiveness. But you sort of feel like they're not really welcoming you. You're not really a cool friend. And you start realizing that why should I be part of this community if I can perhaps get better benefits outside, better physical, support for my condition, and not having to deal with constantly knowing that I'm a second or third tier citizen within the subculture. So why shouldn't I leave? So that's one possible reason that people leave. So this is like a social disability. You might designate it. Another possible reason, this actually falls under the category of social, is a stigma. So a stigma usually develops over time. A social stigma develops over time, and it's in response to something like, for example, you're not good at. Okay, let me do that for later. You are a divorcee. You got divorced. In the community, it's an automatic stigma. The kind of pool of candidates, of potential mates that you have as a divorcee is significantly limited compared to somebody who is an eligible bachelor, somebody in the prime of their age and has a good reputation. And when you realize that due to no fault of your own, it's not like you even chose the first marriage and it just didn't work out, and now you're being punished for that, and it's really infuriating that you have to go through with that. And sometimes you're asking yourself, like, I'm a divorcee, I don't really have any strong ties to the community because the family unit is not present. Family unit is usually what binds someone to the larger community. So if you don't have the family to keep you there in place, why follow the rules? And that's even if you do believe in it, right? Even if you do believe in it. So this is a non-ideological reason for leaving. In principle, you believe in God and you believe in everything, but ultimately, at the end of the day, believing in God isn't enough of a reason to belong in this community. There's plenty of people who believe in God and believe in the Taryag mitzvot, the 613 commandments, and they do not live an ultra-Orthodox separatist lifestyle. So the kind of separatism that is practiced in ultra-Orthodoxy is only validated by having a strong sense of connection to the community. And if you don't have that, then you're suddenly saying to yourself, why am I putting up with this? Why am I putting up with the fact that I must live in a certain neighborhood and I must go to synagogue every single day for 3 times and so on and so forth? All of these unofficial rules are not necessarily even part of halakha, but they're part of the convention. And if you don't do that, then you are snickered upon. And so you start questioning these things. Why am I sacrificing so much? And what am I benefiting in return? They're stigmatizing me. Okay, so why am I sacrificing? So a stigma could lead to departure from the community. Of course, there's also the case of a bachelor, of a protracted bachelor, somebody who doesn't get married at the expected age. So for a man, it's depending on what background you are from. If you're Hasidic, then it's typically 20, 21, no later than that. Once you start exceeding that age, it becomes more and more difficult for you to find a good match. And at some stage, you really have to settle for something inferior, even if you are a perfectly fine young man. There's absolutely nothing wrong with you behaviorally, intellectually, morally, vocationally, like you have a good job, whatever. And in fact, the fact that you have a job works against you because they're expecting you to still be in yeshiva or kollel. And so all of this works against you, and it makes you really resentful. Like, why am I being punished for this? I'm a really smart young man, and what? Why can't I do a good shidduch, a good match? So this all falls into the social category of leaving. The third category is sexual orientation. So in my encounter over the years of the myriad departees, I noticed that there is a nice contingency of people who leave due to a deviant sexual orientation, which means that they do not conform to the heterosexual norm in the Hasidic sector. So they might be either, for the most part, you see gays, you see lesbians, occasionally you see transsexual, but for the most part, it's one of the above. And as is well known, the conservative in all movements, in all religious movements, not just the Jewish ultra-Orthodox, but they do not accept, and now it's changing recently, but in general they do not accept sexual deviance. So which means that if you are, especially if you are an openly practicing and avowed homosexual, then you will not be accepted in the congregation, in the community. And so people leave for that reason. This might actually change, and it's already changing to some extent. There's some Orthodox, not ultra-Orthodox, but at least some Orthodox that sort of tacitly, I mean, if you don't make a big stink out of it, they will try to be inclusive, to the best of their ability. Like if you openly coming with your partner and you're kissing in the synagogue, obviously that's not going to work very well, but they kind of have a don't ask, don't tell policy nowadays. But in the Haredi world, it is still it is still considered anathema, and you are basically persona non grata if you even have such a preference, let alone if you openly display it. So sexual orientation is the third one. The fourth one would be abuse. People who were abused growing up. That is a tremendous impetus for leaving. And I guess the feeling is, here I would use the word vindictive. It's kind of like fighting back or taking revenge at the system. Like, you brutalized me growing up, and now, here, this is what you get in return. I'm not going to be part of this. I don't want you. I want to get as far away from you as I can. And so they run away, and they're basically, I mean, pardon the cliche here, and it's probably not fair to say this, but they carry a chip on their shoulder, meaning they're resentful about the community because they feel that the community caused them harm, which they did, obviously, so it's legit, but, that's basically the kind of mindset that such people have when they leave. So this is basically, in a nutshell, the different reasons why people leave. Now, there might be additional reasons. This is not an exhaustive list, but the reason that I enumerate these different reasons is that it helps explain the kind of mindset that such people have and the kind of route that they will take upon departure. Like, what will they do and how will they go about in assimilating, in adopting a secular lifestyle. Alright, so I'm going to leave that for the next video. Thank you for watching. Have a nice evening.